So welcome everybody to our webinar. This webinar is titled Hybrid Backup. So we're going to do on-premise for business continuity plus cloud backup for offsite ransomware protection. This is David Fogg speaking in the UK, and Joseph is with me, CEO from RQware in Munich. Hi, Joseph.
Hi, David. Hi, everybody.
Actually, I forgot to put my camera is on, so you can see me and you can see Joseph. Yeah. So hi from us. And
hi from Munich or near Munich.
Yeah, I think the winter started today in the UK, so that's a bit sad. Yeah.
We have it since a week.
Yeah. So hi from us. We're going to turn our cameras off now so you can focus on the slides, but we'll come back and you can look at us again at the end. So
I take a seat. Okay.
Cameras off, and then let's make the slide full screen. So that's the introductions out of the way. Just a bit of housekeeping, as we always do. We'll record the webinar. We'll make a YouTube link for it. We'll share that with you, plus the slides, so you can share that with colleagues. And please put questions in the box in the GoToWebinar control panel or the web interface, whichever one you're using, and we'll run through those questions at the end. Hopefully this is all going to be quite clear and simple, but if you do have any questions, then just ask. And that's good. So in this webinar, we're going to look at a 3-2-1 backup strategy, which is one kind of easy way to remember what's important about your backup strategy and why we must have two backups. So we'll explore that, and then we're going to provide our solution using P5, which is going to be to do a replication and a cloud backup. So we'll explain why we're choosing that and the P5 modules that are needed. And we'll look at the benefits of this technique, the benefits of having an on-premise clone, and the benefits, pros and cons of having a cloud backup, and how the two are quite complementary. Then we'll show you the P5 synchronize and the P5 backup workflows in terms of looking at the P5 product interface, and then we're done, and we'll look at your questions. So, and Joseph is going to be here throughout. Well, I'm going to do most of the talking, but Joseph's going to interrupt me with other things that he thinks that we should point out. And I'm going to move this red thing around to sort of highlight what I'm talking about. So we've got this concept of the 3-2-1 backup, which is like a rule that you should apply when you're planning your backup strategy. And what it means is going left to right. You should have three backups. You should have three copies of your data, including the live copy. So it doesn't mean three backups. It means live copy of the data plus two other copies. So one of those copies could be on disk, one could be on cloud, and the two copies need to be stored in separate locations. So this is the second rule. And the third rule is at least one of them should be in an offsite location, so that if you have a premises problem like a flood or something terrible, then you don't have all your eggs in one basket. So that's the 3-2-1 backup. Have three copies of your data, including the live copy. Keep two copies at separate locations, one at an offsite location. And the way that we would approach this, sort of applying this rule with P5, is you've got your original storage on the left-hand side. We would suggest making an on-premise clone of your data using P5 synchronize, and then making a cloud backup of the same data using P5 backup, and thereby you've got those two copies in different locations. So we wanted to just explore a little bit. This is the slide with the most words on, so apologies for all the words. But we have the two kinds of storage, right? We've got on-premise going across the top, and we've got cloud backup, and we've got pros, and we've got cons. So let's just run through. So thinking about an on-premise clone, what is it? So an on-premise clone is an online copy of your production storage, the storage that you're trying to protect, and it's a copy of that made on-premise to another disk. So it's a copy of all of that data on a second disk, on-premise, on-site. So the pros of this is that it's a disk-based copy of live data. So it's online copy on disk. So it's very simple to understand what it is. It's another copy of your data, your important data, on some disk storage at the same location, on-premise. So it's very simple to set up. You can set this up using P5 synchronize in just a few minutes. And you retain ownership of the data. So you know where it is, you understand it, it's on premise, it's on disk. It's within your ownership. You have immediate access to it because it's just a file system. You can go mount that file system on your workstation and and access the files. And if needed, if you completely lost the primary production storage that your business is running on, then you could instantly fail over to it. You could set it up so that your users can just mount this SMB share and away they go. They can start accessing a very up-to-date copy of the original storage, which is no longer functioning. The downsides are that it's at the same location as the source. So if that location has a big problem, then you lose the primary copy and the secondary copy. The retention is limited by the amount of space that you have on those disks that you're copying to. So if those disks aren't much bigger than the original disks, then you can't really retain changing files, previous versions of files, deleted files. You're limited in what you can retain. It's potentially vulnerable to malware and ransomware because it's just a file system with files and folders on it. If some malicious software has access to that disk somehow, then it could encrypt all of those files. It could delete them. Bad stuff could happen. So with the ease of use comes some vulnerability there. And also, it's additional hardware that somebody has to maintain, power, cool, etc. So it's on-premise hardware, more on-premise hardware, which people don't always want, so you've got to look after it. So let's contrast that with the cloud backup, which is the second part of what we're describing as a workflow. So cloud backup, you've got zero upfront hardware costs. You just create the account with the cloud vendor, give it your payment card, and away you go. You're just going to pay for what you use in terms of terabytes per month. It's very quick and easy to provision. You can set up an account, give it a credit card, create the storage very, very quickly. If you have some basic idea of what you're doing, it's offsite. So you're pushing your data to remote data centers that the cloud vendor is managing and maintaining for you. And with certain services like AWS, they have this 3 availability zones. They're putting your data in 3 different data centers. So you have redundancy across data centers. So if a whole data center went down, your data doesn't disappear. You can have any kind of retention, historical retention of deleted and changed files that you choose because you're just paying for the storage that's required. And really important, the cloud vendors support something called object locking, or write once, read many, which means that as soon as you place an object into the cloud storage, you can configure the cloud storage so that object cannot be deleted, even if you try for some period of time, maybe a year. So you configure the cloud bucket to say, everything I give you, don't allow me to delete it for 1 year, and then you are invulnerable against that malware and ransomware that was a problem over here. So the cloud storage can help you lock your data away so that nobody, not even you, can delete it, and certainly not malicious software that might get access to it. But it's not just a file system that malware can attack. It's a remote cloud storage that's accessed via a special protocol. So it's much less likely that software would even try to attack it. So the downsides for cloud backup, getting to the last quadrant of this table, is that you've got those monthly recurring costs per terabyte that you're using. So you've got to keep paying every month. Otherwise, they send you, emails saying your data is going to disappear. Slow upload speeds dependent upon the speed that your office internet connection runs at. That's going to be the limit of how quickly you can upload data into this cloud storage. And finally, potentially the restores are going to be slow because your internet connection isn't as fast as your LAN connection if you needed to restore all of your data. And secondly, some of the cheapest cloud storage has like a built-in, 12 hours-ish restore time because ultimately they're using LTO tape storage in the cloud and it takes some time for them to recover your data. So potentially slow restores. So you don't really want to have to recover all of your data from the cloud backup because you lost all of it, but that's where the on-premise clone would come in. So the cloud backup is more of a backup of last resort in terms of recovering everything from the cloud. Isn't likely to happen unless you lost the on-prem backup as well. So you're not expecting to need to recover many, many terabytes from the cloud in normal usage. And the final thing that we put at the bottom is the pros and cons cancel each other out. So a lot of the a lot of the negatives of one are kind of covered by the cons of the other. So it's a good combination: on-site, clone, and then a cloud backup. In terms of cloud vendors that we support, there are more than these 8, but these are the kind of the biggest ones that we're aware of: Amazon, Azure, Wasabi, Backblaze, and so on. And most of them, to our knowledge, support the object locking feature that we just mentioned. So that's configured on the cloud vendor side if that's something that you want to use. So our proposed backup strategy is as indicated in this graphic. So in the blue box at the top, we've got the customer's production storage. So you've got some kind of disk array, which is their valuable data that needs to be protected. This is going to be attached to some kind of server onto which we install P5, so it also becomes the P5 server. And then through the P5 server, we can clone down here to this lower cost disk array, which is also hosted on a machine where P5 is running as a client. So thereby we get a file and folder based replica of this production storage down here on this other disk array on premise, simple file system copy. And then the second backup is the cloud backup, where we're writing to an object store, offsite, creating an offsite backup of last resort using low cost cloud storage. So hours to restore potentially, and protection against data loss, and also protection against ransomware and malware. So if we're looking at the 2 products that we need to perform this dual backup, we're employing, first of all, P5 synchronize. So this is doing our host-to-host replication from one host to another across the LAN. It's doing this using the TCP/IP protocol, simple network copy using P5. There's no backup index database that goes along with this. We're simply comparing the files on your live storage with the replica to determine what needs to be copied across. With P5 Synchronize, you can retain previous versions of changing files, and you'll see how that works when we look at the demo. You can also retain entire snapshots over time of the source storage. You can do this either using special file systems like ZFS, or we can do it on regular file systems using hard file system links. So as well as being a straightforward copy from A to B, there's some additional special stuff that you can do that makes it more of a useful backup for recovering deleted and changed files from within the last few days. So for the cloud backup, we're using P5 Backup. What P5 Backup does is it's not just making a copy to another disk, it's packaging up in a neutral format your source data and compressing it and then putting it on either LTO, cloud, or disk storage, and we're concentrating on cloud storage. But you could be doing the same thing to LTO tape if you wanted to, and then you could move those tapes offsite to have that offsite backup. And we'll talk a little bit about LTO in the next slide. With P5 Backup, we have this index which tracks all of the files and the changes in a database, in a browsable database. So it's not a file system that we're writing to. It's a proper object-based backup with an index database that's tracking what's been backed up, including versions and snapshots of that data through time. And again, you'll see how that works in the product UI. And importantly, with the backup, it's designed to give you a bare metal recovery. That means that if you lose all of the P5 software, all of the configuration, all the backup indexes that go with it, all of the P5 configuration, it can all be restored from the cloud bucket. So you have this offsite backup of the P5 workflow as part of the P5 backup software, which means that you can bootstrap the whole thing. Joseph?
Maybe to mention that we are also doing this bare metal recover also from cloud. So it's not just from tape, so we are doing this also from cloud.
Yeah, so you can recover the P5 software from the cloud bucket, from the cloud storage. So if you lose everything on premise, you can rebuild all of it just by having access to that cloud bucket and a copy of the P5 backup software. Yeah. And for those customers that have the very large data sets, then we would probably still recommend using LTO tape. So here we can see an LTO library or a standalone drive. So in many ways, you can't beat LTO in terms of speed and capacity that you can achieve. And also LTO tapes, once written on premise, they can be moved offsite to achieve much of the many of the benefits of having cloud storage. But once you get over a certain size, LTO becomes a lot cheaper in terms of hundreds of terabytes of data. And many of our customers are already employing LTO hardware for their archive, so the backup can also use the same LTO software. Actually, something I meant to say up front of this webinar is that this webinar is somewhat different to many of our webinars where we're focusing on archival of customers' media data, which is obviously one of the biggest uses globally for the RQware P5 software. But we thought we'd focus on backup a little more in this webinar and give you a worked example of a backup solution that we think is we have many customers using a solution like this, and we think it really covers all the bases. So yeah, LTO is still recommended for very large data sets, as it is with archival. Okay, so I'm going to flick across now to another tab here in my browser. And here we have the RQware P5 web interface. So what we've got here is we've got P5 running on my Mac locally. I have something called a production share, which is a folder here on my desktop where I have some media data, some images, some movie files, some text files. So this is the data that I wish to protect with my two-pronged backup. And then here under replica, this is a mounted share from the P5 server that we're going to replicate to, which is currently empty. So the first thing I'm going to show you is how to synchronize this data down to here, and then we'll look at how some snapshots and version retention will work. So I'm going to log into my P5 web interface here. I'm going to switch to my synchronize tab, and setting up a synchronized workflow is really easy. There's two things you have to do. First one is you have to point us to the machine that you want to replicate to. So you're installing P5 on the other host, on the LAN, providing the IP address, installing P5 on there, providing P5 authentication so that we can get to the data on that machine. And then we have access to file server 2, which we're going to replicate to. Then you create a sync plan. So here's the sync plan, and this is simply copying the production share from the desktop to a folder called replica, which is in the root of this other host, which happens to be a Linux machine. And then we have two different ways that we can replicate the data. To begin with, we're going to do an update with keeping of previous file versions. And this can be scheduled to run every day, on certain days of the week, certain days of the month, or just running manually. And we can choose which time of day or at what intervals throughout the day we want it to run. So every time this runs, it's going to compare the source and destination file systems and then copy across those changes, create those versions and so on. So let's just save that change. So let's begin by just running this replication job. And we'll look in the job monitor, and then with our folders here on the desktop, you can immediately see the replica folder at the bottom has been populated with the same folders from the structure above. And if we're just viewing the job running, it's finished. So we copied 140 megabytes from here to here. And now these two things are identical. Okay, so that's the starting point. So if we run that synchronize again, nothing will happen because there are no changes. Now, if I make a couple of changes, so let's do two things. Let's modify one of these JPEG files. So let's just clip that down so it's a little portion of the sky and the road and save that file. So now you can see this file was modified today. And then we have this black and white folder. So if I delete this folder from my live storage, so I made two changes. I changed a file and I deleted a folder. And then we go back to our P5 interface. And again, I'll simulate this job running every day by starting it now. And then we go back to the two folders that we're viewing. and we look inside of here, you'll see a couple of things happen. So first of all, the image of the bike, the cropped image of the bike has been replicated across and replaced the previous file that was in that folder. But the previous version of that file has been moved into this versions folder. Okay, so P5, rather than just overwriting the file with the change, P5 is tracking, in this case, up to 5 previous versions of that file, so that we don't fill the storage up with too many versions, but we're retaining versions that the customer could easily go and access. So rather than having to restore something from a backup, they can just browse this file system. And these versions folders are going to show up wherever a change is made. So they'll show up in each folder where there are versions that need to be retained. And then the second thing is that although the black and white folder we deleted from the production, the local share at the top, at the bottom here, you can see that the black and white folder exists. So we are not doing any deletes, and we are keeping versions of changed files. So you have quite a lot of protection here already. You have a copy of all of your live data, but you also have versions and retention of deleted files. Now, it may be that every week or two, you want to tidy this thing up and not have all of these versions building up. So there is a different way of doing this replication, which is called a mirror. And if we do a mirror and keep previous versions as a cycle, you can see what a mirror does is it keeps the target identical to the source, performs deletes where necessary. And then we're going to keep previous data as a cycle. So let's see what happens when we now run our sync job again in the mirror mode. So we can see that running there, and we will just flick to our Finder windows here. And now a couple of things happen. So first of all, we can look inside our biking folder. In fact, I don't think that's quite finished yet. Yeah, that's just finished now. So we're looking inside the biking folder. We can see we no longer have previous versions of that file. We just have the current version. And we also deleted the black and white folder from this folder. Don't know where this folder came from. That's a bit of a random one. But yeah, the black and white folder disappeared. And we have the additional cycles folder here at the top. So the main copy of the files from the top window are now identical. So the stuff that I'm highlighting in the top window is identical to the bottom window. But, and this is something that you might do weekly or every month, that creating a cycle will create a snapshot of the contents of the production share at the top on a particular point in time. So this is saying at 12:22 today, time in the UK, we have a copy of what was in that folder, and this will include things like additional versions of files will be captured in that snapshot, and you can choose how many of these snapshots you want to keep. So you could be creating one of these each week and maybe keep 4 of them, and thereby you have a 4-week retention going backwards where you can see all of the version changes and retention of deleted files, and then anything older than 4 weeks we will throw away. So what P5 Synchronize can do from one disk to another is replicate your data to keep it safe, but also give you enough retention of changing files and deleted files that you don't need to go visit your backup to restore very much, because it's much easier just to go to this replica of your data on disk on premise to go grab previous versions of files. And of course, if you had a major failure and this production storage at the top is no longer available, then you can just share this out to users who can continue working with a very up-to-date copy of the data on a server on premise, so basically providing the same thing. So that's a quick overview of the P5 Synchronize and how this production data can be shared. So next, let's have a look at the backup side of things. So this is where we're running a traditional backup to cloud storage. So when we're in the backup tab, the first thing we need to configure is what we call the cloud service. So this is basically the window where you hook up P5 to your cloud vendor, whichever one you want to choose. They provide you with the account and the credentials that you need to connect. So that information goes in here. Plus, when we're working with this Amazon vendor, then we have lots of different storage classes at different costs. So you have to look into these different products to see which one you want to use. They also have different retrieval options for the cheaper archival storage. And P5 allows you to choose some multiple number of upload streams, independently uploading data from P5 to the cloud vendor. And the more upload streams and the higher your internet speed, the better utilization you can get. So it's important to know that that's a feature. And you can test this connection within P5 to make sure all of the credentials are working and allowing you to connect. Then, in order to complete... Yep. Hi, Joseph.
It makes maybe sense to mention that in case you decide to keep your data maybe not on a very expensive storage class, it's later on you can change this classes at any time. So,
yes.
For example, if you're starting with a storage class standard, it's very expensive, but you can test with this class very good. And later on,
yep.
If everything is running, you can change this to, an example, to archive,
yep.
To deep archive, and then you have the cheapest one because it's not very likely that you have a lot of things to restore because you have already this on-prem storage, and then you have a very cheap storage class at Amazon with more or less very less money, and but with all the security you need.
Yes, because even Deep Archive gives you 3 separate data centers, so the data is stored away in 3 different locations. The Deep Archive is the one which gives you much slower retrieval, but in return for a much lower price with Amazon, whereas standard is instant retrieval, as we'll see in a minute. So so you configure the cloud service, and then there's something called a container, which you configure in P5, and the container requires a local directory where P5 will assemble the objects which it's going to upload to the cloud vendor. So basically, we take the files from your storage, we bundle them together, we compress them into a large file, and then that file is uploaded to the cloud vendor in a single hit. So we're kind of optimizing the way that we're using the cloud storage. And once you've got the storage configured, then you create something called a backup plan. So here's our backup plan called Cloud Backup. And in here, we're simply defining a list of folders that we wish to back up. This is from just the local Mac machine, but you could have multiple machines that you're backing up in a single backup plan. And then down at the bottom, you're choosing when you want the backup to run and which storage, in this case, the Amazon storage that we're going to write to. And this backup will always run as an incremental. So once it's saved, the first time it runs, it will save all of the files it finds, and then subsequently it runs and it just saves the changes. And once it's configured, you can just leave it to run each day and know that you have that backup in the cloud that will keep you safe in the event of anything, other backups failing. So if we run this backup right now, start now just to run it manually, we will get the usual way of seeing that job running in the browser interface. And I don't think much has changed here, so this backup won't run for very long. And whilst that completes, if we go into the browser restore interface up here, and we go into our backup of localhost, then it's here that we're able to browse this database of everything that's been backed up, and I can drill down into my desktop production share and basically see the same stuff that we can see in the Finder in my backup index. And this is the backup that was created on the 31st of August at 13:28. So you see there's a time snapshot to say at this time, this is what was in this folder. And if I go back to yesterday evening and look inside of this folder, you'll see that this black and white folder was in my backup last night, but I deleted that folder this morning. So the black and white folder is missing from here, but it is in my backup here. So if I wanted to recover this folder, I can simply hit restore and next to choose to restore it back to the original location. and start, and that will trigger a job where P5 will go to the cloud storage. It'll find that folder. It'll bring the relevant objects back and uncompress and put all the files back in place. And you can see there in the Finder already, the black and white folder shows up with the JPEG files inside, and those are all readable in the Finder. And then you can see my restore jobs completed here. So if you're using cloud storage, which gives you instant access to your files, then restoring data is as simple as coming in, finding what it is that you want to restore in this web interface, and then restoring it. If I was using one of the cheapest archive storage services where it takes several hours to recover data, then P5 will simply wait for the cloud vendor to make the data available to us, and then the job monitor will sit there letting you know the job is still running, and then eventually the data will come back online. And in return for that wait, you'll pay a lot less for that archive cloud storage. So yeah, there's a kind of round trip there of performing a backup and a restore. So hopefully that was all clear. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Joseph, to that little demonstration?
I love this software.
Would you like to buy it?
Yeah, absolutely. Today.
Okay, I bet you already have a copy, but maybe a second copy.
Yeah,
So yeah,
but you know, I need
think
more copy of it.
you always need more copies of, yeah, indeed. You can never have enough backup software. So yeah, I think this backup, which I'll just put that back up on the screen, this is a really good backup workflow, hybrid, on-premise, making a clone, instantly accessible, everything on a disk, including previous file versions. Very simple to understand. You set it up once and let it run, and then you have this secondary cloud backup, which is running overnight for you, making a second copy offsite in cheap cloud storage, and the whole config and use of the software is really not much more complex than what you just saw in my demo. It's simple to set up, it's reliable, it's easy to it's easy to monitor what's happening. These jobs, these completed jobs, can also be emailed to you. So every day in your inbox, you get an email saying, "Yep, the backup ran overnight. It backed up 60 gigabytes, and we replicated 15 gigabytes to the other server on disk." So it's all very transparent. So yeah, that concludes our run through.
And David, and zero operating. So there is nothing to operate on daily basis. So you don't have to label something. You don't have to look for LTOs which you have to mount. So everything at the first time is administrated. You set up your plans, and then it's just working. So this is also for customer very useful. They do not have an own operation, or they do not have an own IT administration. This is a very reliable thing.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, when you're providing this web interface here that allows people to do restores, you can provide a user login to the web interface that just allows somebody to do restores. And then,
but with the share, it's not necessary. This is just for
just for the cloud. Yeah, just for the cloud backup. But the interface for restoring with the shares is you go here to the replica and you find everything in here. So there is you don't need to.
That's the primary interface. Yeah.
Yeah, the primary interface is the second copy of the data. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, hopefully that's clear to everybody. So we've got a few minutes left to take any questions that anybody might have. But we think
there's Matthias Schulz. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Matthias. So a couple of questions so far, but feel free to type any more in. Can the files sent to the cloud backup be encrypted? Yeah, they can. So there's two different things you can do. You can encrypt within P5. So you can enable encryption within our interface right here. So there is a box that you can enable encryption here, and then we will encrypt the data within P5 using a key that we create within this P5 installation, and then we will use the same key to decrypt when the data is coming back from the cloud. So yes, you can encrypt the cloud backup. There's also encryption options that you can enable within the bucket settings. So actually I have a third tab here which I didn't open, but this is basically the properties of an Amazon S3 bucket. And I just wanted to show that within our S3, we have something called object lock enabled here, where we're going to retain objects without changes for 365 days. So that's something that you can enable within S3, but also within other cloud vendors as well. And I think that you can also enable some varying levels of encryption, server-side encryption, but you could also use your own keys to have S3 do encryption in addition to RQS encryption. So yeah, various options, Matthias, around encryption. David Stone, you have a running folder. My bet is it finishes with a space. You have a running folder.
That's because of the you had a small folder which the name changes on the target, David.
Yes, you're looking here, and there is a
This
space.
crazy folder. Yeah, this
Yeah.
crazy folder with this crazy name. Yeah.
Yeah, and is that why we have that additional folder here? Is that something to do with why that was created? I think it is. Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're correct, David. Yeah, so maybe tell us a little bit more about what you understand about that. Yeah. Okay. So, Christoph, perhaps mention that the features backup plus sync are available in the bundle P5 Sync Edition. Yes, indeed. So if we're talking about what it is that you would actually need to purchase to get the RQware licenses needed to do this, then there is a bundle called P5 Sync Edition, as Christoph mentions, which includes both P5 Sync and backup. So there is a ready-made bundle with a single SKU to purchase from RQware to get everything that you need to do this, that also provides you with some hundreds of terabytes of cloud storage licensed as well. So yeah, that's great. P5 Sync Edition is what you need. A question from David. Question from Phil. I'm David. David, could we use our own storage devices hosted in a data center rather than a commercial cloud storage provider? Yes, you could. There's two ways that you could do that. You could either use P5 Synchronize to replicate the file system to a file system attached to a host running in the cloud. So that would be like a Amazon EC2, like a Linux or Windows instance running in the cloud with some storage. Then you can use P5 to replicate files and folders to files and folders on a file system attached to that host. If you wanted to run your own cloud object storage, then you would have to provision that using some S3 server software, because P5 backup needs to connect to an endpoint that is an S3 server in order to write objects to it. Or we can write those objects to a regular file system as well. So you can give us a file system and we'll write our container objects onto that file system. So yeah, basically there's a couple of ways that you could do that, either using P5 Synchronize or P5 Backup, David. If you want to know more about the ins and outs of that, then send me an email, df@rqware.com, and we can discuss that in a bit more detail. David Stone asks, I'm assuming you can't do CDP, only scheduled backups. I'm not sure of the acronym CDP, but I'm assuming that means triggered by changes, yeah? Yeah. So, yeah, no, we can't. We can't respond to file system changes by replicating them immediattle. We are scheduled.
But David, we are getting the changes. So we are also working with Linux and with other operating systems. We are getting changes from the operating system, so that it's not necessary to scan the entire file system for changes.
Yes.
So yes, we get changes of the file system, but we are not triggering ourselves on these changes.
No, but we can shortcut the need to traverse the entire file system looking for all the changes and use the change detection in the operating system to tell us where the changes are, so that we very much more quickly can do that synchronization pass. So you can then run synchronization much more frequently, maybe every 30 minutes or hour or something like that. So thanks for the question, David. David's following up with a few other questions. So, it's an SMB issue. Okay, yes, I'm using SMB on this replica share from Linux. So that's what's causing that. And I run some GB Lab servers with P5 integration. How would I enable? So I think that question, let's take that to an email, David. So I'm df@archeware.com, and we can discuss your specifics around GB Lab servers and so on, because it's probably not, we don't have the time for that right here in this session. Jonathan asks, we've got a lot of questions today. Jonathan asks, when you have object storage locking for say 365 days, do you simply reset part P5 to have the retention of 365 days as well? Yes, exactly. Well pointed out. So if I'm configuring my cloud storage to hang on to every object I place in it for 365 days retention here, then I mirror that setting in my P5 backup plan here. I also have a retention setting here, and I would set that also to 365 days like so. And then P5 is expecting to retain the objects in the cloud for 365 days, and the cloud will not let me delete anything for 365 days. So then everything is lined up. And by the time P5 is trying to remove the oldest backup data from the cloud storage, it's available to delete from the cloud storage, but not before then. So yeah, that's exactly how that works. Jacques asks, is there an integration with Edit Share? Yeah, there is. We're running on directly on Edit Share storage hosts. So you could do both of these backups that we've described today, where the primary storage is Edit Share storage. And we do indeed have customers doing exactly that. I know of one that's doing this hybrid backup with their Edit Share storage. Again, email me df@archeware.com, Jacques, and I can give you more information. And final question for now. P5 is operating well on Minio S3 servers available on TrueNAS. So yeah, there's an open source S3 server called Minio, which you could run on your own hardware infrastructure and then use that as a target for P5 backup. So that's Minio, M-I-N-I-O. If you Google that, then you'll be able to discover more about running your own S3 infrastructure on your own hardware. Okay, so that was a lot of questions, Joseph. I think, did we answer them all? Well, I think we gave good answers to everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Okay. So with that's 40 minutes you've had. So I hope everybody found that useful, learned something. We really think this is a fantastic, software solution to securing data in the modern age where we have access to cloud, low-cost cloud storage, and you can replicate on-premise. So many customers have older disk arrays that they don't know what to do with. So you can employ that older hardware with P5 Sync to have that on-premise backup.
It's a good combination from both worlds. Modern world.
Yeah. All the advantages of both is worth having.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thanks, Joseph, for joining me. And
thank you, David. Thank you, everybody.
Always. And thanks, everybody, for joining us, wherever you are in the world. This webinar is going to be repeated at 6 p.m. UK time. So that's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in 4 hours. So if you want to watch it again, or you want to tell your friends in America about it, then
I will do.
Yeah, do that. Okay. Thanks, everybody. I'll put the camera back on to say goodbye. So, still here. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And keep an eye on the usual emails from us to learn about what we're doing next. Oh, and we'll be at the IBC show in Amsterdam in about 2 or 3 weeks' time. So come say hi in person. I'll be there.